Fox 9 team saying the northern lights were shining across Minnesota. The display followed a G2 moderate geomagnetic storm watch issued by the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Let's quickly join right now by Sean Dahl with NOAA, the Space Weather Prediction Center. You're a forecaster. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your patience. Obviously, what we saw last night was incredible. It was beautiful. And so many people did get a glimpse at it, something that they rarely if ever do. What happened last night?
Andy, thanks for having us on here. We had a geomagnetic storm, a very large magnetic disturbance, and these are important because they can affect many of the technologies that so many of us rely upon, from the electric power grid to communications to GPS and more. A space launch was even scrubbed today because of this space weather storm that we experienced yesterday. The space launch was scrubbed today, and now they're trying to figure out whether they'll have it again tomorrow. So what happens, we had the arrival of what's called a coronal mass ejection, a blast of solar material in the form of charged particles and magnetic fields, and they arrived out here at Earth yesterday evening, and they arrived in a way that made things very favorable to spin up the aurora like the pictures you're sharing right now, and that many of us got a chance to see, and we think that potential exists yet again tonight, although maybe not as strong as last night, but it is there.
Yeah, and we're talking about it, the aurora borealis, the northern lights. Usually in Canada, some of the northern states like Minnesota, they're familiar with it, Montana, but people in Texas and Colorado, Arizona, even way down in Florida got a glimpse. How rare is that for some of the southern states to see the northern lights?
Yeah, it's very rare, Andy. We don't have these events very often. This is only the fourth time in this 11-year solar cycle that we're currently in that we've issued this G4 or greater storm watch. That's how rare they are. Also, there's so many things that need to line up, which makes this even more extraordinarily difficult for something like that to happen. It's how strong is the magnetic energy in these CMEs as they envelop Earth? What is the direction of that magnetic field? Is it the same as Earth? We're not going to see a big response. If it's opposite Earth, like last night, we're going to see a big response. And these are a lot of the unknowns that we just don't realize until they reach a spacecraft only 1 million miles from Earth, and that's where we can finally see what the structure of these CMEs actually is.
That is so very fascinating. And some of these images, you can see like the hues of orange, there's pinks, there's blues. Is there something to that? Is there a difference, and why do they make the colors that they do?
Yeah, it all has to do with how these charged particles are interacting with our molecules in the outer layers of our atmosphere, and all that exchange of energy eventually releases light. And that light is what we see as these different colors, and it just depends on what kind of molecule it's interacting with and how high up in the atmosphere it is. And so a lot of people catch that red with their digital technologies like their cell phones that are so good at doing this today, even though they may not be seeing it. But yes, that is what happens when these events get to this level, and it's just a fantastic thing to be able to see.
Yeah, it's so very cool. We're down in Arizona, so we don't get a really glimpse at it. But you mentioned that space flight that was washed out, that was pushed off from Blue Origin, as opposed to saying the New Glenn ready to launch, however, due to the highly elevated solar activity, the potential effects on the Escapade spacecraft. The NASA is postponing its launch until space weather conditions improve. And I don't think a lot of people, you do, think about space weather all the time. But I don't want to necessarily get into the fact that it was washed. But obviously, what kind of conditions, how much are they monitoring the space weather and optimal conditions? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, they have to monitor and pay attention because some of these spacecraft launch platforms or the thing that they're launching have some vulnerabilities. We don't necessarily know what those are, but they do. So they contact us and they reach out for our forecast information and our warnings and alerts to find out what's actually going on. And in this case, they were doing that yesterday, and they eventually made the decision to wait it out. So now they're trying to determine whether they can launch it tomorrow, I do believe. And we've already been engaged in some conversations about that. You know, and they're just one of the entities that gets impacted by this. The electric power grid, we talk to them. Air traffic control, we talk to them. FEMA, even the White House Situation Room has been getting information about this storm.
That is so very fascinating. And you mentioned this, just kind of the magnetic, and we're still learning so much about it. But in terms of, you see what's happening with the rockets, they're concerned about it. Is there any potential concern for people, for humans with this?
No physical harm is going to come to anybody because we have a protective atmosphere and our magnetic barrier that shield us. So it's really those technologies that we rely upon. The one sector I can think of people that might actually be impacted by these types of storms that we're currently experiencing are people that need precision GPS.